optimizing displays for in-store behavior analytics. Joining me now are Rajeev Sharma, founder and CEO of VideoMining, and Richard Hirata, SVP of Shopper Science, also with VideoMining. Gentlemen, the podium is yours.
Thank you, John. My name is Richard Hirata, and along with Rajeev Sharma, we will be presenting an approach to help both manufacturers and retailers optimize the performance of their displays through the use of in-store behavior analytics. Today's agenda will begin with a brief overview of where the industry is with respect to planning display activity and what the next big opportunity is for improving the decision-making process. Rajeev will then highlight the technological advances in capturing actual in-store behavior that form the foundation for improving display planning by including shopper insights in the planning process. The remainder of the presentation will then focus on where and how the observed in-store shopper behavior can be incorporated into the planning process to optimize display performance. So, why care about how we plan displays? Well, to begin with, it is an important component of merchandising. A recent survey found that there were about 65 displays in a typical grocery store. Given that there are approximately 38,000 stores, this translates to around 2.5 million display locations in the U.S. From a manufacturer's perspective, assuming that they are charged $300 per store for the right to set up a display, manufacturers are paying about $700 million per week to run displays in grocery stores. In spite of its importance, the industry has limited insight into how different elements of a display influence its performance. A lot of research has been done into pricing, i.e., the discount associated with the merchandising, as well as the impact that different merchandising tactics, features, displays, as well as other media such as radio or television have on the performance of a promotion. But when it comes to the impact location has on display performance, anecdotal evidence, historical practices, and folklore have guided display location planning. Actual insights are missing. What is needed is solid research-based evidence for decision-making, much like the industry has for price and merchandising tactics. The question is, why does it matter? First of all, it matters simply because there are a lot of display decisions being made. Based on 2.5 million displays, 65 million is a reasonable approximation of the number of display placement decisions being made annually. To put 65 million decisions in perspective, this represents actually over 900 NFL seasons worth of playmaking decisions by both the offensive and defensive units. Clearly a large number. Because of the large number of displays, even a small improvement in performance represents a tremendous value. A marginal gain of just $5 per display per day, which translates to about 1 to 2 units of additional sales, means about $4.5 billion improvement for the industry. Note that some of our research has actually found that in certain instances, performance gains of up to 200 to 300% can be achieved. For an additional perspective, this marginal gain would represent a $250,000 increase for a manufacturer running a one-week national event with 20% of all grocery stores carrying a display. The key is that these gains are achievable simply by making informed decisions about where to locate displays. These are free decisions. The retailer already has the space, and the retailers have already committed to invest in the displays with the retailer. What's really new is groundbreaking research, the missing insight, the influence that location has on display performance was recently produced by the Category Management Association. A white paper, Revolutionary In-Store Insights, NCAP Displays in the Shopper, was based on actual in-store shopper behavior data provided by VideoMining. This paper provided hard evidence that display locations impact to the performance of a promotion. Locations have an inherent value that is independent of the promotion placed there, i.e., location does matter and does impact performance. And just as important, this paper identified key attributes of a location and how they contribute to the location's value for any given promotion. Those attributes and how to use them will be discussed in the third section of this presentation. But as a setup, we will start by having Rajeev describe the data behind these insights.
We have a question that just now, Richard. Where can I get a copy of the CMA white paper?
Okay, this is Rajeev. Yeah, if you email to us or if you go to our website, there's a link for getting the white paper. We'll be happy to email it to anyone who is interested. Okay, so moving on to the next portion, the question is, how do you actually improve the display performance? And a key to that is being able to measure the shopper response for displays under different conditions so that you can really understand what's working, what's not working, because there's no real way to tell until you really try it out. So the three key conditions that needs to be met in order to measure the performance of a display is to really use real stores. So you cannot really simulate this in virtual reality because the behavior has to represent how shoppers actually behave in store, because much of the display performance is based upon sometimes impulse, and it's very hard to simulate that in either virtual reality or when a researcher actually interacts with that so that and asks questions in a survey-based method. So it has to be based on real shoppers in acting in real stores. And the third important condition for us to be able to come up with a solution for display optimization is having a large enough sample so that you can look at all the different aspects of display that impact the performance, which basically means you need to have some kind of scalable way of collecting data. Fortunately for us, there are technologies accessible that, let me see if I can get the video to play. Okay, so fortunately for us, a technology is available that can track the entire path of the shopper throughout the store so that you can actually see how they navigate the store, and finally when they check out, you can see what they actually bought. This is very important because, simply speaking, you want the display to be on the path of the shopper. So that's the first starting point to begin to formulate the question of how to optimize the display. The second important thing is not just where they went, but how they engaged. Oops. Video missing. Okay, never mind. So if you have seen the video, you would see the example of a video being analyzed by software so that you can actually tell how shoppers are engaging with the display, and more importantly, you can see how they're making decisions. So you can actually have access to both the engagement behavior as well as sort of decision-making behavior, and especially at a very fine granularity, because many of the decisions are made in split seconds. So you want access, we want to be able to measure that real moment of truth when they're engaging with the display and making that decision. The third component of the measurement is not just being able to measure in aggregate, but being able to look at different segments. So fortunately, the technology for determining the demographics of the shopper, as in gender, age range, and ethnicity, so you can understand how a display impacts males versus females, or millennials versus rest of the population, or for example, Hispanic shoppers. So you can have access to responses for different segments of the shoppers, not only by the demographic segments, but by looking at the basket and quantifying the trip types. You can try to understand the impact of the display by trip types, or loyalty, how loyal they are to the store or to a particular brand. Having access to this segmentation is an important element to sort of improving the content, improving the display performance. And we'll get into more of that later. Okay. Okay, this was the video that showed the software in action. We're showing the software processing the video automatically and determining their gender, age range, and ethnicity. The important thing is, the important thing is to realize that it's automation, and therefore with automation you can actually generate huge amount of data. What you see in this video segment is 7 hours of paths being tracked in a store. So as you can see, it's a huge amount of data. It's a big data on in-store behavior, so that you can now determine the impact of displays by looking at millions of shoppers interacting with thousands and thousands of displays, and begin to formulate strategies and tactics based upon the data that you see. For example, you can look at a holistic view of the store and see where people are going and where they're engaging, or a heat map of the traffic or heat map of the engagement. But most importantly, now you can translate all the unstructured behavior data into a structured data set, for example, representing the path to purchase in terms of navigational behavior, engagement behavior, decision behavior, and purchase behavior. So being able to dissect the impact it is having, or having access to where your display is coming in the path to purchase. And not only by the overall segment, by each particular shopper segment, demographics, day part, trip type, loyalty, store type, or region. Access to this big data with different elements of measurement by shopper segments is really a true basis for new wave of analytics that can help in optimizing different merchandising elements, including displays. And to talk about a very specific element of display, which is the location, back to Richard.
We had a question that come in. Richard and Rajeev, a question just came in here. Okay. How can you identify the trip type for a shopper?
Okay, basically, as Rajeev noted, we can follow the path of individual shoppers. And when they get to the cash register, to the checkout, we then can marry that path with their actual transaction information, and then basically apply, if you will, the traditional trip types, which might be, basket size based to that journey, if you will. So it's the marrying of the actual journey with the purchase information when they check out that allows us to identify trip type and classify paths.
Okay.
Okay. So in this next section, we will identify the principles that the CMA white paper identified as the key attributes that determine the value of a particular promotion location relative to the given promotion. The first principle, more is better, stems from the realization that not all parts of the grocery store receive the same amount of traffic. The store heat map on this slide shows areas of the store that receive relatively more or less traffic. As can be seen by the 3 highlighted locations, the amount of traffic does differ for different display locations. It is intuitive that if the objective is to sell more, then it is better to be seen by more shoppers. A display location with higher levels of traffic would be preferred over a location with less traffic. Hence, more is better. The video mining measure for traffic is exposure rate, and exposure rate is basically used to quantify the traffic for each of the display locations. Let's take a look at this video. Okay. In the middle of the screen here is a display, and the important thing to note is that although there's a lot of traffic flowing around this display, no one is showing a particular interest in any of the products there. Clearly, the point then is that high traffic does not automatically translate to interested traffic. This picture simply illustrates what we want: people who are interested in stopping to shop the display. Video mining measures the propensity of traffic to stop and shop with the metric engagement rate. In this case, it is used to measure the level of interest for a display. Here's a graphical representation that traffic does not automatically correlate with shoppers who have a high propensity to stop and engage. The store heat map on the left measures traffic levels and is the same one we saw previously. The map on the right measures engagement rates, the frequency for which traffic is likely to stop and engage. Here, the highlighted area of high traffic actually has very low engagement, as you can tell by the colors here. In spite of having high traffic, the location is not necessarily a good one because, for whatever reason, people are not likely to stop and shop there. The previous slides identified two attributes of a display's location that contribute to the value that it brings to any promotion. Next, we will introduce a new concept called Gross Receptive Audience, or GRA. This is a measure that combines these two attributes. It represents the inherent value of the display location independent of what promotion is placed there. It effectively represents the number of shoppers who are likely to take an interest in a promotion at that location. To help understand this concept, we use television ratings as an analogy. In the television world, GRP, or gross rating points, is a measure of the audience that watches a particular show. Likewise, gross receptive audience measures the audience for a display. GRA is a function of the exposure rate and engagement rate. As illustrated in this quadrant chart, high engagement and high traffic or high exposure lead to high GRAs, i.e., a lot of traffic with a high propensity of that traffic to stop and engage translates to a large number of shoppers that show an interest in promotions at that location. Conversely, low traffic and low engagement translates to few shoppers showing interest.
A question came in just now, Richard. How much does the price or price discount contribute to engagement?
It definitely can, but that, again, price or price discount is really a promotion-specific entity, and at least in this part of the discussion, we're really talking about what does the location itself bring to the party. In the second half of this discussion, Rajeev will actually talk about some of the things like how does price affect it. But this portion is specifically about the location itself. Okay?
Fair enough.
So, the intended use of gross receptive audience is really to compare display locations to identify which one is more likely to determine shopper interest. Its use is to compare location A having a high GRA to a location B with a low GRA to conclude that location A is preferred over location B. Again, this is more for the selection of which location is better. What's important to note is that GRA is not necessarily intended to directly forecast the actual performance of a promotion at that location. For example, if the GRA for location B is X and for location A it's 2X, this does not imply that location A is twice as good as location B or that the promotion will do twice as well at location A versus B. It simply indicates that location A is preferred. Often you'll see that marketers are interested in focusing on specific subsets of the public. It could be as simple as products were intended for certain groups such as runners or seniors, but it could also be that the messaging of a particular promotion is aimed at specific groups such as parents with teenage kids. When this is the case, in the television world, marketers often focus on a concept called TRP, or targeted rating points, instead of GRPs to find the right audience for their commercials. For displays, we can do the same. Targeted receptive audience, or TRA, is the analogous concept. TRA is like GRA, except that it's calculated based on a subset of store patrons who, like TRPs, meet a specific inclusion criteria. The TRA concept is particularly powerful because the way the inclusion criteria can be specified is very robust. Not only does it allow segmentation based on traditional attributes such as age or gender, but it can be used to create subsets based on in-store behavior such as trip type or even time of day. Straightforward examples are uses like targeting males for sports-related products or quick trip shoppers for single-serve products. But it's interesting and important to note that TRA can be calculated for a more complex group of shoppers so that we could find the best display locations for groups such as female millennials on fill-in trips. The third principle identified in the CMA white paper relates to directional flow, that is, the direction that the travelers or the shoppers are traveling. The principle is that it is preferable for shoppers to be exposed to a display for a product before they would normally encounter the product in its usual spot. To illustrate this, let's look at an intuitive example. Assume that the GRAs, or gross receptive audience, for end caps 4 and 2 are the same. In both cases, 1 and 2, we promote product A on end caps 4 and 2 respectively. The difference between cases 1 and 2 is the general direction of travel for the shoppers who encounter the displays. Most people would agree that the situation represented by case 1, people encountering the display before they would normally encounter the product, is better than case 2, where they encountered the display after having been exposed to the product in its normal location. To understand this, let's look at the next slide. The logic itself is pretty straightforward. In general, displays serve two roles. First, they are a location from which shoppers can purchase the product. Secondly, the display can serve to remind or incent the shopper to go shop at this product's primary location. When a shopper encounters a display after they would have typically seen the product in its normal location, the impact of this that the display might have is diminished in the following ways. First, the shopper may have already made the category purchase decision, in which case the display would have no influence on the shopper. Or, the display does create interest for the shopper, but the particular item of interest is not on this display, and the shopper is reluctant to, quote, backtrack to get it, so they continue on without making a purchase. The net impact for either reason is that the display's influence is less if it is visited after seeing the primary stocking location. An important comment at this point is that the directional flow, principle 3, better before than after, is fundamentally different than the first two principles. The first two principles relate to the value of this display location itself. These are completely independent of the product being associated with the display. Directional flow describes a location relative to the primary stocking location and therefore has a dimension to its value that is category dependent. Putting all three of the principles from the CMA white paper together leads us to the concept of likely audience. Likely audience is a way to score display locations so that they can be ranked to identify the better or best ones for a specific promotion event. In concept, likely audience quantifies the number of shoppers that are likely to be positively influenced by the display. As the diagram illustrates, the approach starts with the receptive audience score, either gross or targeted, and then incorporates the directional flow of the traffic and the product's primary stocking location to derive the likely audience score. The score for this location can then be compared to other location scores to rank them relative to each other for the purpose of selecting one for the specific promotion. This next slide closes the location section of our discussion with an example of how the three principles, traffic, engagement, and directional flow, were used by VideoMining's location planning system to rank display locations based on their likely audience scores. In this beer example, it was found that the display location in the lower left, down here, is preferable over the actual location in the upper right. Both locations had similar gross receptive audience scores, but the directional flow, as noted by the arrows, green and red, was a difference maker between the two locations. The foundation of quantitative location planning for displays is based on accurately capturing detailed actual in-store shopper behavior patterns related to traffic, engagement, and directional flow. Video mining offers the ability to capture this information and interpret it into useful metrics such as gross targeted or receptive audience and likely audience scores. This is then delivered in an integrated analytic planning framework that will identify the locations that can optimize display performance. With that, I will now turn it back to Rajeev to discuss some additional optimization principles which focus on the display promotion itself.
Rajeev, we just had a question come in, Richard. Is there a way to tell how much better a location is?
No, the intent here is really for comparison, and again, just like I mentioned with the gross receptive audience, it isn't necessarily an absolute number in and of itself. It's simply to be used to, if you will, rank order different locations.
Okay.
Thank you, Richard. So far we have discussed and focused on one important parameter of display, which is location, location, location. But obviously there are many other aspects, like the question previously raised about pricing, that impacts the performance of a display. So before we get to the parameter optimization, just review the basic, very simple framework for measuring the success of a display. So as Richard had already alluded to, we have three basic measures. Exposure rate, which basically tells what percentage of the store traffic has a chance to actually see the particular display. Engagement rate talks about what percentage of those people who are exposed to the display actually engage visually or physically with the display. And the final stage of the funnel is the closure rate. What percentage of the people who are engaged with the display end up picking up a product or purchasing the product. So it gives a very simple metric to evaluate the actual performance of the display. In fact, the numbers you see is an example of a real scenario where less than 2% of the store visitors actually engage, but a big percentage of the people who engage bought the product. But the true measure, as I think again Richard alluded to, is not just to have increased sales being picked up from display, but also a set of things which we call halo effect, which is the display actually, people who actually notice the display, engage with it, and are influenced by that to actually either go to a particular aisle that has the same primary product or even complementary products. So it's a very important function which is sort of which intuitively is known, but because we could not measure it before, has not been really involved in the decision-making process. So by actually being able to measure how many people actually, what percentage of people who engage made their way into a primary aisle and then bought products from the same category or complementary category, you can truly assign the value or impact of a particular display. And in some cases, it's beyond the sale at the particular trip. In some cases, it's simply building up awareness of a particular product or particular category or even the pricing strategy so that shoppers can actually come back in the next trip and buy that product. So there is a host of halo effect that can be attributed to displays. But let's start with some simple parameters that can be sort of optimized using this measurement framework. The first and most important one is what product to display. And frankly, this may come as a surprise or not, but some categories on end caps or secondary displays improve the overall category performance, driving traffic into the main aisle and build truly incremental sales for the category. Others actually steal traffic from the main aisle for the reason that Richard mentioned. Basically, by preventing people from the main aisle, you can actually lower the performance of the overall category. And in the white paper, we have presented some examples of categories that are never good at displays, an example being paper towel, where and you can improve the performance, but generally speaking, if you analyze the category performance in one dimension and the end cap or display performance in the other dimension, paper towel and some products like that simply do not help in improving category performance. Whereas there are other categories like bottled water that not only are good at displays, but also good for the category performance. And because of the access to the large data set, you can actually benchmark all categories in the store in terms of how much they contribute to aisle traffic, increasing aisle traffic versus pure performance, in terms of incremental sales from the end cap. And again, we had given some examples. Let me give another very good example of a halo effect from a category. In this particular instance, we worked with a client to create an end cap for bread, which is not a typical product that is displayed on an end cap, because most people think bread is already on your shopping list, so you don't necessarily need a secondary display. But we demonstrated that end caps actually lead to incremental sales of bread, but more importantly, by positioning the end cap carefully next to complementary categories, you can actually increase the performance of peanut butter, jelly, and packaged meat. So this is again something very intuitive, but being able to quantify what the net effect of placing a bread end cap next to these categories was, helped in making a quantitative judgment on the true value of a display in a particular week. So going from category to other display parameters, clearly even within a category, different brands and even different products within a brand have dramatically different performance for the same location or same end cap. And this obviously has to do with inherent demand for that particular product, as well as the impulsiveness nature of choosing that brand over other brands in that category. And that can be also influenced by pack size. We found dramatic differences in performance by pack size on displays, and that has to do with the trip types. So by actually doing an analysis of the exposure, the kind of thing that Richard was talking about in terms of receptive audience, and zooming in on the trip types, you should be able to understand why a particular pack size works better for a particular display versus some other display. So important thing again is all of this would be driven by actual data and not just by guesswork. Another related kind of issue is how many categories or how many products go into a particular display. To illustrate that, we did a case study where we looked at many different combinations of number of categories on a frozen end cap. We went from 1 category to 7 or 8 categories, and then we showed that after 2 categories, the performance of the end cap actually diminishes. And the hypothesis is that people actually get confused, and it no longer serves the purpose of being an attractive place to stop and be reminded of a product. It just becomes too confusing. It looks like any other confused category where there are too many categories in one place. So again, there's empirical evidence to show the right combination of products that are categories that go into end cap. As the question was raised earlier about a very important parameter in terms of how should you price displays. Well, it's a very big question, so I don't think I'll be able to answer in one slide, but we did find a very good empirical evidence that there is a trade-off between the actual price, promotional price, and the location of the end cap. So by carefully playing with the location and the price, you might be able to optimize and not leave a lot of money on the table. Basically, you may not need to discount as much if you choose the right product and the right location. Similarly, there are questions about whether you should have other promotions like features at the same time as displays, or should you have them separate? There is no one answer. The only question is that it does vary by category and brands. Unfortunately, many of these practices are done based upon habit. A lot of people just habitually have features based on displays, or retailers kind of have that process. Many of them are actually wasted. So the best thing is to really use hard data on a particular category or brand to see whether the stacking of feature ads as well as price promotion goes well with a display, or a display itself is enough to drive the desired effect of increasing category or brand performance. However, one of the more underutilized aspect of display is messaging that goes along with the product display. And a quick case study to illustrate that point was when we did a case study for a client where there was a football-oriented sweepstake promotion going on. And we compared two different messaging, one targeted towards the kind of the end user, the consumer, the young kid in high school for which this was intended. And the other one was intended for the shopper, which is the mom. And no surprise, but there was a very significant difference in the performance, and the performance was much better for the shopper. So it goes back to what Richard had raised earlier, that you're by targeting the message to the shopper versus the consumer, to the right message for the consumer, you can dramatically improve performance. In fact, a simple impact of changing the messaging can have impact of 10 to 15% difference in terms of performance of a display. And usually that's a very low-hanging fruit because you already have the location, you already have the price promotion going on. It's a question of messaging properly. The last topic in terms of kind of looking at different parameters that go into getting most out of the display is special displays or solution displays. Both manufacturers and retailers realize that one of the ways to improve sort of the performance is to identify the need states of shoppers and try to create solutions where the combination of products that meet a particular need, for example, a lunch solution, or in a Thanksgiving solution, having all the components of a Thanksgiving meal together. In concept, it's a very nice idea, and most people will agree that that should be good for the shopper. In fact, in a case study that we did, we actually surveyed shoppers, and 90% of shoppers who went to that particular store where there was a lunch solution reported that they actually used the lunch solution to create the sandwich components, to buy the sandwich components. But our hard behavior data showed that only 30% did. So it was an interesting case study of what people say is not exactly what they actually do. We also diagnosed using the behavior data why that was the case, and in many cases it turns out that some of the fast-moving products like bread moved out very quickly. So people would see bread and then grab that and it will go out of stock very quickly. And as well as there was lack of awareness. So whenever there's a solution center, there are issues, operational issues like out of stock for a given component that negates the impact of the solution center and or messaging to raise awareness. So there are a host of issues that can be addressed by, again, having visibility into the behavior with respect to the display. So to put it all together, how do you make this practical? How do you get access to the in-store behavior data analytics for optimizing displays? There are two easy ways. We have two programs, one in grocery called Grocery Shopper Impact, or GSI, and one program in C-Store called C-Store Shopper Impact Program. And in both these cases, we use the data from dozens of retailers in a large panel to basically capture data from millions of shoppers and thousands of displays to build that playbook for a category using a deep dive for display. That really provides the kind of starting point to understand all the questions about relative performance of locations, categories, and even broad principles about how pricing impacts the performance or how promotions along with display impact performance. But in the end, it's the partnership between the manufacturer and retailer to utilize some of the insights to plan, whether it's a location, whether it's any other aspect of display. And the best way to do that is actually testing displays and being able to track the performance so that it's not left to chance, and you can kind of reap the low-hanging fruits that lies, eliminated from the data. So with that, the real conclusion is that you have a very large problem of activity that we routinely do, impacting a huge financial investment for both manufacturers and retailers. Most of the decisions are today made by gut feeling or collective sort of wisdom. It's not necessarily correct, and there are a lot of low-hanging fruit by measuring the appropriate things, for example, location or what category goes in a particular location, what product goes in a particular location, combination of price, and all the other parameters. And these do really make impact on the performance, and the in-store behavior and data analytics is now accessible in order to make those decisions easy to make. With that, I'll open the floor for questions.
Yeah, we have one more question that we haven't asked yet, Rajeev. Can you name some of the retailers in your panel?
Certainly, in the grocery panel, we have the likes of Kroger, Ahold, Safeway, Albertson, Giant Eagle, and we have more than a dozen C-store retailers like Circle K, Racetrack. So there's a growing panel of retailers who are joining sort of this industry panel where you can benchmark the performance or the shopper behavior both for the channel as well as for a particular retailer against the channel.
Okay, excellent. Rajeev and Richard, that was very well done and a lot of great information. Thank you very much. And for more information, you can reach out to VideoMining.com.